Welcome back. I'm talking to Andrew Johnson about the Apollo missions. Now then, we were just looking at this image of an Apollo 17 mission, which to me, assuming that's correct, that they're both NASA images, that's a smoking gun really for me. What do you want to talk about next, Andrew?
Well, you know, again, there's probably one of the other things which isn't discussed that much on the web is the pictures of the lunar rover. You know, there's some interesting things about the lunar rover. As you may be aware, the lunar rover was only taken up to the moon, according to the official story, on the later missions. It wasn't, I don't think, until Apollo 16, I think, was the first mission where they used a rover. Other people have measured, for example, the size of the rover and found that even if the wheels were folded up as is claimed, there wasn't enough space to it to fit. Wasn't enough space for it to fit in the command module. Right. Other people have. I haven't done that measurement, but apparently people like Jim Collier did that, and say that they didn't have enough space for it in the first place. These pictures that I've got on the screen here, which we can show, are very unusual. They look fine again when you look at them initially, but if you study them carefully, there are no tracks around the wheels. It's like this rover has been picked up with a crane and dumped on the set, or the tracks go in the wrong direction. What image over on the right, which is AS17-135 20544, you can see there aren't any tracks, in the front or back of the rover. It looks like it's just been dumped on the set. So I have those problems. Whilst we're on the subject of the lunar rover, I can also go to some other data which somebody sent me a few years ago, and it's to do with the battery system on the rover. Before
you go to that, Andrew, you need to just explain what the surface temperature of the moon is when it's lit by the sun. Just explain.
Yes, well, I mean, again, if you go and look at the official data for the surface of the moon, I wouldn't use Wikipedia, I avoided that source, but the actual surface temperature on the moon averages 107 degrees centigrade. So that's the average temperature on the surface of the moon.
So that's higher than boiling water.
Right, 107 degrees centigrade. That's the average, not the maximum, that's the average temperature. So that's 224 Fahrenheit to do the conversion. And somebody sent me a few years ago an interesting link. A chap in Germany actually sent me this link. So go and look at the Lunar Rover Vehicle Operations Manual. And this is a public document. It's on the NASA, one of the NASA archives, and you can go and download this document yourself. And it actually gives the specification and the tolerances for parts of the lunar rover system, one of which is the battery. And if you look at this column of data, these columns of data on their own data, maximum operating temperature limit for the lunar rover battery is 125 Fahrenheit. 125 Fahrenheit.
Which is in centigrade?
It's going to be about sort of
times by 5, divide by 9, and add 32 or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. It's going to be about 80 or 90 80 centigrade,
right,
something like that.
Just to make a comment from an engineer, right? I worked for years and years with hardware engineers designing all kinds of different things that would work outside on motorway systems, things in power stations, on railway lines, and when you're designing something, especially if it's going to work outside, whoever's manufacturing the subcomponents, there will be a temperature range that it will operate in, and you would not select that component, and if its operating range was outside of where it's going to be used, and that would be the most standard engineering practice to do that. So, for me, that is another smoking gun, Andrew. That would fit a component, especially at NASA, into a device that specification was way outside its operating range. It's just the most basic of engineering errors.
Right, absolutely. So we have, you can see that right there from their own information is the hardware would not have worked. So yeah. So if the rover could not have worked, then why are they putting out this story that they took up a rover, took the rover to the surface of the moon? And also other people have pointed out, I haven't put it in my presentation, but you can speed up the film of the rover by about a factor of 1.5 times or 2 times, and it just looks like a car driving on a set, with the dust flying up and so on.
And there's another, you mentioned earlier that there's no cooling system on those rovers, which would mean they would be ridiculously hot.
Right.
Okay.
The components would all get very, very hot, And the tyres would get very hot as well. Obviously, the rubber can withstand heat and so on, but all kinds of problems like that.
And the same applies to the module that they used to get off the moon as well. That would have it was on the surface for hours.
Right. I mean, I think they were landed for 7-8 hours or something on the first mission. I don't think they were there very long. But I pointed out to people, I think in this presentation I also make a point of it. If you drive to the supermarket and you're on an asphalt surface, you go in and get some stuff and it's a hot sunny day, middle of the summer, and it's 25-30 degrees. You put the windows up so that nobody nicks anything from your car. You come back to your car after maybe half an hour, whatever, an hour, and you put your hands on the wheel and you're going to hurt your hands.
And if it was 107 degrees,
how did they maintain the internal temperature to something that the astronauts could stand? They claim that they had battery power for the air conditioning. That's the official claim, as I understand it, that the air conditioning within the module was battery powered. But you can compare it to a car, because you've got 3 guys in there, so you're going to have a similar sort of volume of air within the module to a car. You don't have any convection on the moon because there's no atmosphere. So a car can be cooled by convection. In other words, when you start driving the car, the air coming past the car will cool it down. You can't do that on the moon because there's no gas to give that sort of cooling. So you can only cool it by radiation. So how did they do it? How did they keep the lunar module cool? I mean, to me, when I thought about it, I never thought about this years ago. When I believed the Apollo story. How did they keep it cool?
Now, also related to temperature on the surface of the moon, one of the astronauts on the later missions actually placed an object on the moon is for sort of sentimental reasons. Just tell us about that. And you've done a little experiment to try and replicate this.
That's right. Charlie Duke, and what he decided to do is because of Mama's apple pie and those sorts of American, cultural ideals. Looking at the Charlie Duke photograph, Charlie Duke was one of the astronauts on Apollo 17, I think, or Apollo 16. And he took this photograph of his family with him, and he put it in a clear plastic bag, and he put it on the surface of the moon. And we have a NASA image of that family photograph. In other words, a photograph of a photograph allegedly on the surface of the moon. And I saw this web page 2, 3, 4 years ago, and it said, well, this is impossible because the average temperature of the moon, the average temperature is over 100 degrees, 107 Fahrenheit. And if you have
centigrade,
centigrade, correct, 225 Fahrenheit, so above the boiling point of water. And if you have a photograph, now remember, photographic paper is made of a number of layers. It's got a layer that actually takes the image and makes the image with whatever chemicals they put on there, and have like a card layer behind it to give it some rigidity. And those layers, when heated up, expand at different rates. Just like a bimetallic strip in a thermostat would. So this photograph will curl up, and you can show this. All you need to do is get a photograph, put it into an oven, and it will curl up.
And you did that, so let's just take a look at it.
So here we have a family photograph, and over here we have an oven, and this oven is set to 100 degrees centigrade, and I'm now going to put this photograph in the oven. She's cooking some of my dinner, and then I'm going to watch it through the glass. And that you can see that in very short order trying to get better light, but you'll see it when I open it. This is curling up within seconds. So I think that's a pretty convincing demonstration. And here it is. You can see it there curled up, and that's only at 100 degrees centigrade.
Would it behave the same with air around it, do you think, Andrew? Do you think that
right,
makes
well, I mean,
a
that's the question. I haven't done this in a vacuum, so it's not a 100% accurate simulation, but I don't know of any reason why having air around it would
stop it from
curling. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. I mean, obviously in this example the air is transferring the heat to the photograph, but in the example of the surface of the moon, the bag was in contact with the surface of the moon. yet it didn't. There appears to be no significant effects on the heat. So that right there, to me, proves that that photograph cannot be taken on the surface of the moon.
Right. And you showed an image of a footprint, which is a very famous image,
Right.
From an astronaut's boot, which shows very clear, very well-defined lines of the sole of this boot. And you would contend that that looks like it's got moisture in it.
Well, this is, again, if you look at that image, it's the iconic image of the first footprint on the moon. I made a couple of observations about this photograph. Remember, these were cameras are mounted on the chests of the astronaut, so he's going to have to bend right over to take a good, clear picture of this. They had no viewfinders, but the shot is well framed. So that's one comment about that particular photograph. But the other comment, as you said, is about the impression. If you look at the way that those grooves of the boot are pressed into the surface of the moon, to me, maybe some expert in materials who can correct me on this if I'm wrong, because I wouldn't say I'm an expert on this, but to me, to get that sort of impression, you need moisture to bind those particles together.
So if you were on just a sandy beach with no moisture, it wouldn't leave a print like that.
No. If you've got Wellington boots on and you're on the top part of a beach away from the sea, where the sand is all dried out completely and it's just grains, you don't get footprints like that.
You would nearer the sea where it's still damp.
Correct. And that looks like that footprint has been made in some type of sand with moisture in it.
Right. All right.
So
and the surface of the moon won't have moisture in it?
Apparently not, because again it's 100 degrees centigrade, so any moisture would have boiled off.
Now, I mentioned in the Channel 5 documentary, probably the main argument they used to debunk the people who don't think we landed on the moon was the photo. They said recent photographs have been taken by lunar orbiter that's overflown most of the Apollo landing sites and filmed all of the junk that was left behind, the rovers, the flags, and the actual craft. So is that not incontrovertible evidence, Andrew?
Well, you would think so, wouldn't you? And people have made various claims about these images, and we talked about these Chinese images, which I've supposed I've not seen those. I've not.
We'll come on to that.
Right. Okay. But this story for me starts probably 4 or 5 years ago when somebody sent me an email and saying, well, Andrew, can the Hubble telescope see the images on the moon? Because everyone's heard of the Hubble telescope. It's a big, space telescope, very powerful and so on. It takes all these wonderful images of the various galaxies and so forth.
So the argument is, all they have to do is point the Hubble telescope at the moon and they'll see everything that's on there.
End of story. Sorted out, Okay. But again, it's not as simple as that, because if you look at the figures, and it's easier than you think to work this out, and we can explain this very easily with a bit of sort of GCSE level trigonometry, basically. And we can say, well, we know the size of the lunar module approximately. It's 4.2 meters across, so we've got an object sitting on the moon. If you're looking at it in plan view, it's 4.2 meters across, basically. You can then look at what the distance from the Earth to the moon is, which is 385,000 kilometers. That's sort of an average figure. Obviously, it goes up and down from that because of apogee and perigee and so on. But if we take those as a basic set of figures, you can add a factor of 10 either side of that if you really need to, and this will still show the answer. And then you end up with what's called an isosceles triangle, and you can work out the angle, because why we want to work out that angle that I've labelled on the diagram is that equates to what's called the resolving power of a telescope. Any telescope that's built, it can resolve individual objects of a certain size, and that size is measured as an angular separation, not a physical size, because the angular size is what you actually see, and the physical size varies.
Sure. Just to explain that, Andrew. Okay, so if you look at the moon and draw a line from your eye to the top of the moon, and draw another line from your eye to the bottom of the moon, they make an angle. That is the angle subtended to your eye, and the telescope will have that. It's a very, very small angle that telescopes can normally resolve.
Correct.
Can see objects at an angle that small. So the Hubble telescope has a resolving angle. Yeah.
That's right, and you can check out what that is. You can find that information. It's measured in seconds of arc, because as people probably know, a circle is divided into 360 degrees, and then each degree is divided into
60 seconds,
60 minutes,
And then
each minute is divided into 60 seconds.
Right.
So in each degree, you've got 3,600 seconds of arc. And you can look up the Hubble's resolving power, and it comes out at 0.05 seconds of arc. So that's, as a fraction of a degree, that's 0.05 over 3,600. So it's 1.389 times 10 to the minus 5 degrees is the resolving power, if you will, of the Hubble Space Telescope. Or depending, we have another figure which I found, and that came out as 3.89 times 10 to the minus 6 degrees. So that makes it even more sensitive. You know, it can resolve even smaller objects.
Right. But
if you do the calculation for the lunar module, you come out with a figure of 3.3, or rather 6.26 times 10 to the minus 7 degrees. So the angular size of the lunar module on the surface of the moon is 6.26 times 10 to the minus 7 degrees.
And that's a factor of 10 times too small.
Correct.
For the Hubble to be able to see.
Yeah, correct.
Right.
So it's 10. Essentially, it's actually about 20 times.
Right.
Yeah. But,
so if the lunar module was, say, 30 times bigger, then it would be able to see it.
Right.
But it can't because it's too small.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. According to the figures that I've been able to work out, and obviously, if there's any viewer, you know, that finds an error in these calculations, they've been up on my website for several years, and I had one small correction, but it was only by a factor of 2, which didn't affect the factor of 10. So if anybody finds an error, that I'd welcome any criticism of that, you know, of any part of that argument. So in other words, all we can say is the Hubble's no good, can't do it with Hubble, and so we have to look at something else.
Right. So NASA brought out these images of all of the remnants of the Apollo missions.
Correct.
All right. So case solved.
That's right. Of course, NASA had what's called the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. I talk about this in this presentation that I put together. And that was launched June the 18th, 2009.
Well, just hold it there, Andrew. We're going to go for another break, and we'll be looking at NASA's alleged images of the Apollo relics after this break.